Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. This is bonus episode 46, and I'm going to talk to you about some upcoming changes to the podcast. What I want to assure you is the podcast is going to continue, and the reason why I'm making these changes is I want this to be sustainable over the long run. As we've talked about, I'm really good and very tenacious at pushing, and I've been pushing really hard for the last 6 months. If I were to go back and do it again, I would probably do it the same way. Now at the 6-month mark, if I continue at the rate that I'm going, I'm going to burn myself out, and I want to be here for me and I want to be here for you. So I'm going to talk a little bit in this episode about what's been going on, what's made it hard for me to make the changes that I need to make, and where we're going to be heading in the future. It's kind of interesting. As a highly sensitive person, there are certain areas where it's really hard for me to push through my limitations. And if it's a project that I'm passionate about, I seem to have the ability to really override what my HSP needs are. And I think I've functioned this way for a really long time. So we've talked about this. In some ways, it's very adaptive. It's worked. I've pushed this podcast out. I've been promoting it. It's growing like crazy. You guys have done an amazing job sharing it. Something is just tipped with the podcast, and we're kind of growing exponentially, which is incredibly exciting. I'm so grateful. I really want people to know about the trait of high sensitivity. The downside of that is that I haven't done a very good job listening to my body. The last 6 months, I've been really out of balance. I haven't slept well for months. I thought it was a function of age. It may be. I wake up in the middle of the night. My mind is very busy. It's difficult to go back to sleep. So it's not uncommon for me to be operating on 4 to 6 hours of sleep. And this last weekend, I slept for 8 hours straight. I can't even remember the last time that happened. So we know, highly sensitive people, we need our rest. We need our downtime. And anyways, I feel like I'm going to keep saying the same things over and over again. I haven't taken a full weekend off since I launched the podcast. And even this last weekend, having made the decision that I needed to make changes, I didn't go into my home office on Saturday all day, which is really unusual. And then Sunday night, I just had some things that I needed to take care of. It's been over 6 months since I've even had an entire weekend off where I'm not responding to emails or following up with schedules. So it's still a learning curve for me of how I can create better boundaries around my time in order to be here and viable for myself and for our clients and for you, the listeners. So the good news is that this week, by the time you hear this, it will have been in the past. Steve and I are going to be taking a 4-day vacation. The last vacation we took was a few years ago with the boys, and so this is the first getaway that we've had in a really long time. We are probably going to record an episode or two while we're gone. We've talked about it. The nice thing is that we're more relaxed. We don't have other obligations, so we're going to bring all the recording equipment and maybe do an episode or two. But what I'm hoping that I'm modeling to you is how we take care of ourselves and how we set boundaries. I've been saying for months to the people that are close to me, what I'm doing isn't working, and I just wasn't able to do it any differently. So this is where that radical self-compassion comes in. And we just accept that this is where we're at right now, and we're not in a place where we're ready to make a change. I could have been beating myself up. There are advantages and disadvantages to how I've been operating for the last 6 months. There's no right or wrong. There are certain things about it that have been very, very effective and really worked, and there are other things that haven't worked. And I cannot keep up this pace and production schedule over the long run. It's just not doable. So when we take a look back at the bigger picture, and this is something that I've talked about with you before, I've been making major changes in my business. I've been making a shift from therapy to coaching, which means learning a whole new way of working with people, getting new paperwork together. Getting the online groups for HSPs together was a really big process because I can't do coaching and therapy. Well, because I need to split them, they need to be two separate businesses. What's been going on is needing to separate out and create an additional business for coaching, a different bank account, a different website. Some of that is completed, some of it is still in process. I've been getting great feedback from the listeners about what it is that you're wanting, how the podcast is resonating for you. And all of this has really created a lot of overwhelm for me, having people reaching out to me for coaching and for therapy and having questions and giving feedback. I love it. And I don't have the systems in place to stay on top of it. And again, because I'm separating out coaching and therapy, now I have 4 email addresses, one for the podcast, one for coaching, one for my licensed work, and then one for everything else. And so trying to filter emails to the correct email address, being able to go back and find stuff. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is to validate that when we are entrepreneurs, when we start new things, when we're making changes, when we're growing, I think we don't give ourselves credit for how many plates we're spinning. And it's really important that we recognize how many skill sets we're using or how we're leveling up. And it takes an impact on us. We're going to feel overwhelmed, or we're going to need to come up with new systems, or things are going to fall through the cracks. This is how we grow and change. And what I've really been thinking about a lot recently is Brené Brown has this new special out on Netflix. She's got some great TED Talks if you just Google vulnerability, shame. But what she talks about is, if we're going to live our lives daring greatly and we're going to be in the arena, it's Teddy Roosevelt's talk about being in the arena, we're going to fall, we're going to fail, we're going to get bloody, we're going to sweat. And for the people that are criticizing us, that are sitting in the stands, unless you're out here doing the work, I don't really want to hear what your feedback is. And so it's really okay that we start something and then we pivot. Like, this isn't working, I need to make a little bit of a change. We try this, we need to make a little bit more of a course correction. I think we have this idea that success is we figure out what we want, we go for it, and it's a linear process. And it is so not. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We do a little jiggle to the left. We do a little jiggle to the right. And when we recognize that, the process is really about showing up. Success is about showing up. We do the best we can. We stumble, we fall, we sidestep, we backstep, we move forward. We're in the process, and that's what success is, and that we have the ability at any moment to choose and to re-choose what's working and what's not working. And I think that we often have such high expectations about, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be, this is how I'm going to get there. And if it looks any different than that, we feel that we haven't been successful. And success is really in taking the next indicated step, even if that means re-choosing. So some of the things that have made it difficult for me to make some of the changes that I'm going to be making is I really have a fear of losing listeners. I feel like I've gained some really great momentum, and I have a fear that if I take a break, if I make some changes, that people are not going to listen. And the reality is I have no control whether you listen, whether you come back. It's my intention to create quality content that's meaningful. But once I put it out there, it's really out of my control. You know my importance in naming things. The other thing is that I really feel like I get a pretty strong sense of my value and worth from my work. It's just how I'm wired. I feel a little bit embarrassed because I've spent a lot of time talking about Brené Brown's work and how she talks about hustling for our sense of worth. And you know what? I've been hustling for my sense of worth. I get really caught up in the statistics, the downloads of who's listening, where are they listening. Again, there's no right or wrong with this, and it's not that statistics and information are good or bad. It's good feedback. I'm just acknowledging that I can get really hooked into feeling like my value and worth increases if I'm getting more downloads, if more people are listening, if I'm getting feedback. And I do know this, that the content that I create for you is based on real life experiences that I experience, that I struggle with, that go on with the people close to me, when it's appropriate to share information that I'm talking about with my clients. That's really what my intention is for having this podcast, to create education, a sense of connection, for everyone to really know that sensitivity is an amazing superpower. And there's these other sub-layers where my value and worth has been tied into the numbers. It just is what it is. So I've really debated about whether or not I want to share this, and I may end up regretting it. I may not. Who knows? Again, I'm just giving you information. At this point, I lose money on the podcast. I'm okay with that for right now. I really have a vision of long-term where I want to be. I think as the podcast grows, there's a really good chance of getting sponsors so that the cost of producing the podcast, hosting the podcast, having an editor, that those costs will be covered. And I'm really okay with that. But I want to be transparent with you that this really is a passion project on my part. I don't share that with you to make you feel guilty, to make you feel bad. One of the options that I've thought about is setting up a Patreon account where listeners can contribute to the podcast if they feel like they're getting value from it. The advantage to that is then the podcast is really driven by you, the listener. The reason why I haven't done that, at least up until now, is I'm not producing content for you to pay for. I'm producing content because I'm passionate about sharing this information. I feel pretty mindful about what types of sponsorship would be acceptable and not acceptable. It really needs to be in alignment with my values and what I feel will be valuable to you, the listener. I'm just giving you a little bit of an inside peek about what goes on. So what does this mean for you, the listener? My plan is that probably mid-June to mid-July, I'm going to take a month off where I'm not going to be releasing any new episodes. What I'm probably going to do is re-release episodes that have played in the past and the ones that have the highest downloads. The truth is that many of you listeners have been with me from the beginning and many of you are new. I have about 75 episodes that I've released, and what I'm noticing with the downloads is that the earlier episodes are not getting listened to, which is fine. There's some good content in there. And what I'm wondering is, with releasing often 2 episodes a week, you guys don't have time to catch up and listen because you're kind of saturated with an hour interview and then a bonus episode. So I'm going to take off a month in mid-June to mid-July. I'm going to be going to a silent retreat. I'm in the process of negotiating if that's going to work, but I've registered and applied, and I'll be telling you more about that as that comes closer. And then I think the month of December, I'm going to take the month off also. Again, I will be reposting the most popular episodes so that you can either listen to those during the month that I'm taking time off, or you can use that time to go back through previous episodes and find stuff that you may not have listened to. The other thing I'm pretty sure that I'm going to start doing is only releasing 1 episode a week. I'm still playing around with how this is going to look, but what I'm thinking is what I may do is bank a few bonus episodes because they never equal an hour. That's just too long for me to sit and talk. But what I may do is have 1 or 2 or 3 bonus episodes released on a Tuesday that equal 40 minutes, 60 minutes worth of content, and then the following week have a regular episode. It's not going to alternate because, again, it takes more time for me to create the bonus episodes, but I really love these. This is one of the favorite parts of doing the podcast, is doing the bonus episodes. So rather than sit on it until I figure out perfectly how I'm going to do it, I'm just going to give you an idea of what it's looking like for me right now. So another thing is that back in April, this is May now, and you will probably be hearing this in May, I belong to a group of podcasters, and we had agreed to talk about everybody's podcast on our show in April. I just kept forgetting. This is that place where details just kind of escape me. So I want to tell you about 3 podcasts by fellow podcasters, and if you're interested in checking them out, feel free to. The first one is called Emotions in Harmony with Dr. Carmen Roman. It's kind of great. This is a bilingual podcast, and she releases episodes in English and in Spanish. So if you know anybody who is a native Spanish speaker and does not speak English as well, she talks about all kinds of issues around mental health. And I did an episode on her podcast a while back on vulnerability. In the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com, I will list all 3 podcasts and links to each of the podcasters' page where you can find their podcast. The second podcast is called Hypnotize Me with Dr. Elizabeth Bonet, and she is a hypnotist and a therapist. She's got some great content. And the last podcast is called Woman Warriors, And this is with Elizabeth Cush, who is also a therapist. And so she talks about how women can work with their anxiety and depression to live better lives. I think that's pretty much it for now. I really want to tell you how much I appreciate each and every one of you. You've been amazing listeners. The feedback that I get, I really appreciate it. This podcast is growing. It's kind of amazing that it took about 5 months to hit 10,000 downloads. And in the last 6 or 7 weeks, we have almost 18,000 downloads. So something has really tipped, and I'm just so grateful and thankful for each and every one of you. I really hope that from listening to the podcast, you're learning more about yourself, you're learning more about your partner, about your children, about people in your life. You're really seeing that being a highly sensitive person is amazing. It's our superpower. My hope is that you really feel empowered and can embrace the traits that you have, because we are the healers, the creatives, the teachers, the justice makers in the world. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.